with the Committee for Home Affairs, and today we'll be focusing on the issues in the government work plan as they relate to that committee. I'm Deputy Yvonne Burford, and with me on the panel are Deputy Simon Fairclough, Mr Mark Doré, and also Mr Mark Huntingdon, who is the Scrutiny Principal Officer. So it won't be possible to cover everything in the short time we have available, but we've tried to stick to matters of significant public interest or where significant sums of money are involved. Following this session, the Scrutiny Management Committee will decide if we want to undertake any further questions, and a transcript of the hearing will be published in due course. We should finish at about 12 o'clock. We'll take a break at 11 briefly, a comfort break. But in the meantime, if everyone will kindly ensure their phones are set to silent, and if you'd like to introduce yourselves, please, and perhaps we can start at this end with Mr Leray. Thank you.
I'm David Leray, Director of Operations for Justice and Regulation. My primary responsibility is within Home Affairs.
Thank you.
I'm Deputy Rob Prow, President of the Committee for Home Affairs.
Thank you.
Vicky Laswell, Committee Secretary for Home Affairs.
Thank you. So, on with the questions. Unsurprisingly, we're going to start with the outage of the IT systems last weekend and still in some places ongoing. So what I wanted to know is what impact has this outage had on your committee in terms of staff time being wasted, and what do you think the financial impact overall might be?
Thank you for the question. I mean, I think from the Committee of Home Affairs perspective, IT is delivered centrally through a contract. So the delivery end of government, which Home Affairs is very much part of, is always going to be affected by such an outage, and of course it will vary across the various services that we have, because IT is in this day and age an absolute fundamental. So the ability for the Committee of Home Affairs to react with regards to solving the issues is extremely limited. And I think perhaps if you're asking around the effects around the various services, I think it would be probably better if the Director of Operations could give you that update. I did ask for an update yesterday on the effects of the Home Affairs services, which was provided to me by both the centre and Mr Leray. So if I could through you ask if that's your specific part of your question.
I think that would be helpful. I think I think the committee understands that you have limited controls yourself in putting it right, but nevertheless you will feel the impact, and we're just interested in the extent of the impact, perhaps the financial impact. I know you can't give an exact pounds figure at this stage. And also I think the other thing is, with the emergency services, do you feel that it's caused any lives to be put at risk?
To go with your last question first, no lives were put at risk. Okay. We were able to respond to all incidents in the normal way. JESIC, which is our Joint Emergency Services Control Centre, remained operational. Most of the software systems within law enforcement continued to be operational. Guernsey Border Agency had some outage with our GEM system, which is our electronic system for clearing freight. Fortunately, there were minimal shipments over the weekend, so it gave us time to install our business continuity plan, which we managed to implement ready for the first ferry on Monday morning. So worked with freight agents to make sure that systems were put in place so that perishable goods and all the other freight was cleared efficiently and effectively.
Okay.
Printing was still down yesterday, and some of the networks, however, they did recover by the end of yesterday, and we were almost back on track by the end of yesterday afternoon. However, we did have business continuity plans in place, so there was minimal impact in the services that we provide, particularly the customer-facing ones.
Okay, that's good to hear. And have staff had to work overtime to get back to sort of a normal position?
No, not really. The senior management team went in on Sunday afternoon. However, they would have done that as part of their duties. So, no, as far as I'm aware, there was no overtime impact.
Thank you. Moving on, 18 months ago, at the last public hearing with the committee, we discussed the progress which had been made, and this is still on the subject of IT, had been made in response to Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary's report 4 years ago that heavily criticised the IT infrastructure and provision in bailiwick law enforcement at the time. And at our last hearing last year, the head of law enforcement, Mr. Hardy, who I understand is away on business, advised that one of the main issues was having to work out of an old granite building, and that trying to put the correct systems into an old building like that really does not work. Mr. Voden, the then strategic lead for digital transformation and communication, continued that theme and said that despite spending money on upgrading systems within the police HQ, that will only take us so far, and there comes a point where purpose-built headquarters is going to be needed, not just because of the deficiencies within the building, but because of the multiple sites you operate from and the ability to embrace future technology. So my question, having set that scene, is how long before we need a new police headquarters?
The answer to that is firmly within the government work plan, and making that a priority under the government work plan is a feat in itself. I mean, the states of Guernsey, as your committee is very well aware, is under considerable financial constraints. A project that there is a project being scoped around looking at a new police headquarters, but that needs funding, that needs prioritisation, and the money to do it. As far as the Committee of Home Affairs is concerned, both the committee and indeed the law enforcement services that operate from that building are well aware of its deficiencies, and the head of law enforcement has already outlined them to you. But getting the funding and the traction that we need, frankly, under the government work plan, is not going to happen in this term. But certainly the preparatory work has already started, and the first stages of looking at business cases will develop this term. Okay,
has the site been identified?
No sites have been identified. The scoping for what is needed has started. I mean, I think where you're looking at a development of that size, as with the hospital modernisation programme, you appreciate it is a huge piece of work, and it needs to be done properly.
Absolutely, and clearly my committee does hear from all the other committees, and being part of the states, appreciates all of the various pressures. But just coming from your last hearing and what the Chief of Police said, I just wondered if you had, in your view, when would this be needed by? Because clearly it's causing a lot of restrictions and possibly, economies which could be sort of greater achieved.
Yeah, I agree, and I understand the question, but the Committee of Home Affairs has to live with the realities, and what a lot of the issues that have come out of the HMIC report, they are urgent and they need addressing, and we are completing replacement of the police HQ network cabling in the existing building. We need enabling building works, and we have got the funding, and there is a project in place to adopt a digital service across the whole of the network, which includes linking in with the national police forces. So I think the best answer I can give is that in the timescales within the constraints of the government work plan, we have to work with the existing infrastructure and buildings that we have, and we're committed to doing that, and we have started doing that, and we hope that by September 2023 we will be in a lot better place.
Okay. And would you say that a failure by the states to prioritise a new police HQ means that a lot of funds are being spent on the existing building that perhaps wouldn't have otherwise needed to be spent?
I think that's inevitable, but I think that runs through every state's project of that kind. I was involved last term in the hospital modernisation, and from becoming a project once it's got funded, that's a stage that takes a lot of time, and then you've got the contracting out and the building of the new facilities, and the same would be for the for a new police headquarters, and that is a constraint. And you are absolutely right that where you are putting money into old infrastructure, it would always you would always prefer to put that money and funding into new facilities. Okay. But I would not deem this project to be any different to any other such capital project.
Okay, thank you. Mr Hardy said at the last hearing that because frontline officers do not have mobile data, this meant that it interfered with their ability to attend incidents and deal with them without having to go back to Police HQ to use the computers. Has that issue been resolved?
Again, this is work in progress, and I think we have senior police officers here, and perhaps they would be could give you the operational view if you're happy to.
Yes, please. I'd be interested to hear. Thank you. Do take a seat. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Chief Inspector Andrew Hockey.
Good morning.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Prowl. So the IT update from an operational point of view is that there's Microsoft 365, which has been rolled out across the states of Guernsey, hasn't yet been rolled out into law enforcement. It's a different program which needs tighter securities and linking in with the national sort of policing direction as well, and accreditation. So the work's in place. I'm aware there's been a lot of work going on over the last 6-9 months. A sort of large amount of money has been put forward to assist with the with driving this forward. We are working with the project teams now, and we anticipate that this will be in place by September 2023.
Okay.
And that will enable us to have a fully accredited, fully secure network to be able to use the law enforcement IT environment out in the wider community, without police officers or customs officers having to return back to the offices.
So you see a lot of efficiencies coming from that once it's operational? Yes,
yeah, and it will provide a lot of other operational efficiencies within the general working and our ability to collate data and sort of build strategic risk assessments around various vulnerable areas. So I do see that there will be this is a great opportunity going forward. But we know that this project won't be in place till September next year.
Mm-hmm. And I mean that means that will have taken 4 years to achieve that work stream. Do you not think that's quite a long time?
Yes, and I understand. Working in that environment, it can be frustrating as well. However, I understand the mechanism of how it works in the process of the funding, having to find the funding because it is a substantial amount of money and it is public money, so it needs to be done correctly and we need to ensure that it is done with the correct scrutiny, pardon the pun. But so yes, it has been a long time coming. However, now it is coming, and we can work towards those efficiencies, along with Mr. Prowl mentioning about the cabling project, which will bring a different sort of way the network works within police headquarters, in terms of simple things like Wi-Fi. That's not available to us flooded throughout police headquarters. So it's enabling us to have this sort of even Wi-Fi throughout police headquarters.
Which I think the public would be really quite surprised to know that.
I think they would. However, we have been working with it. It's a way we've been working sort of ever since throughout the past, but we're now working towards the future. I think it's a positive step. Yes, it has taken a long time, but I think it's about taking that positive steps, driving forwards towards next year, and achieving this environment.
Mm-hmm. Has Mr. Vodin's departure had any effect on the progress of IT within bailiwick law enforcement?
Well, of course, Mr. Vodin sort of made these comments. I was present in December 2019 when we had this meeting around the frontline improvement plan, and of course that centred around this type of these discussions that we're having now. And of course, his departure, I think, maybe did have some effect because that maybe the strategy changed within the states of Guernsey. The government work plan came into place, and sort of funding streams were redistributed elsewhere. I think his comments and his suggestions have always been in the minds of the head of IT and IT across the states of Guernsey and into Agilicis, and we've been having constant meetings throughout, trying to build the right strategy, trying to build the right way forward. And I think this is what we're seeing now. These sort of past years of work are now moving towards this sort of September next year.
Okay, thank you. I think a final one on this. Mr. Hardy also said that the IT budgets you used to have as law enforcement are now managed through the state's IT partner, and that now whenever you want to make IT improvements, you need to make a business case and go through a prioritisation process which sucks in effort, and that the bid for resources is quite complex because of the technical issues that are required to make the new systems work on the existing infrastructure. Has that situation improved at all?
Well, I'm sure it has improved, but I think Mr. Hardy brings out a very good point, and a point for the Committee of Home Affairs. He is right in what he said. The budget responsibility, and indeed the oversight for and support for IT has moved out of committees. So therefore, that moves out of the influence of the service providers. You mentioned the former head of IT, and Mr. Sadler from Central IT is here, and I think it might again through you it might be worth you directing some of the comments to him, because the point I'm making, it's okay to ask these, and it's absolutely right and proper that you ask these questions to the Committee of Home Affairs, and you also get replies from the services, whether it's the police, the GBA, or any other service. But the ability for a committee to influence the funding and provide the expertise is outside of the committee. We work in a business partner environment, and if it would be helpful, perhaps Mr. Sadler might be able to add more to what I'm able to say.
Yes, certainly. I think, though, first what I would say is that what you're saying there, and as I've mentioned, we completely understand that we've got an overarching IT system now. But, the subtext from Mr. Hardy's comments last time could be interpreted as saying that, it was all a lot more efficient when you were able to organise your own IT improvements yourself. And I just wondered if, changing to the new system, whether perhaps some of those initial frustrations have now settled down, and in fact it is starting to work more efficiently for you when you need to make adjustments and new improvements within Home Affairs.
I think my answer to that is that the committee also needs that accountability and ask the questions. And I think the impression of the committee is that although we're not exactly where we would like to be, we are starting to make some progress. And certainly the committee keeps a very close eye on these projects and liaises very closely with policy and resources on this. I'm not sure that my interpretation of what Mr. Hardy says and yours is quite the same, because the HMIC review in 2018 did pull out that there were issues, and although IT has been provided centrally for some years before that, clearly the investment in IT centrally has been an issue. So I don't think my interpretation of what you're saying that this isn't a new issue, and helpfully HMRC identified what those issues were, and that's helpful to the committee because that enabled us to put the right pressures on the centre to get some progress and some transformation.
Okay, if Mr. Salter would like to contribute, more than happy if he wants to. Sadler, sorry, wants to come forward. Sorry, I was reading the name thing at the end there.
Morning.
Good morning.
Paul Sadler, Technology Business Partner.
Thank you.
Fundamentally, my role is to work very closely with Justice and law enforcement in terms of technology, where they would like to go, and how that aligns with state strategy, what we actually need to do to meet our vision.
Thank you. Did you have any further comments you wish to add?
I think there was a comment earlier about timing. What I just wanted to add to that is, in terms of timing, what we have to also recognise is that within law enforcement there is a requirement, a need to maintain connectivity and compliance with the UK. So sometimes some of the things that we want to do and possibly need to do are not as simple as just saying that's what we want to do, we need to get funding. We have to go through sets of compliance with the UK to ensure that we can do this. So I think one of the things was mentioned was 4 years for Wi-Fi. Yeah, 4 years for Wi-Fi is indeed a long time. And the reason behind not getting Wi-Fi in right now, and it's because of the compliance that we've had to go with the UK to actually get to that point. So we're in dialogue with them now, and part of the design that we've put in, they're allowing that, and they're allowing that because they've got certain criteria in their own space to allow Wi-Fi to be part of their own solutions, and therefore we're allowed to progress with that. However, when we started off on this journey, bringing Wi-Fi was considered too high a risk in terms of maintaining our compliance, and compliance was very, very difficult to achieve in the early days.
And this comes down to obviously security and privacy. And
absolutely.
Right.
It's about the data that's being shared.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you very much. Sorry, I do have one final question, Deputy Prow, on this. Would you agree with the following synopsis? The modernisation of bailiwick law enforcement IT service is very much in the process of delivery now.
Absolutely, I would. We've been quite rightly going through and analysing the issues, but certainly I think the committee is far more confident that we are in a much better place and that we can make the progress that we clearly need to.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. I'll now pass over to my colleague, Deputy Fairclough, who's got some general questions.
Yes, good morning. First of all, is the current housing crisis in the island, including a lack of key worker capacity and high costs, causing issues for your committee?
A very good question, and certainly as other committees and in particular where those committees are delivering specialist services, yes, the question of recruitment is a key issue, and obviously housing and the ability to get affordable housing and accommodation for those people that we need to fill the roles and the vacancies is absolutely an issue, and certainly it does affect our ability to recruit.
And how many potential workers would you say it's affecting, Deputy Prow?
Well, certainly we have quite a few vacancies in law enforcement, and in
could I ask how many?
I think we've got up to 60 vacancies across law enforcement and the FCB. The Director of Operations, I think, will have the exact up-to-date figures, and we are very strongly recruiting in both those areas. So,
would it be possible to ask for a breakdown across those areas of maybe police officers, border agency staff, and the financial intelligence?
Yeah, I'm sure the Director of Operations could give you that now.
Yeah, certainly. So we've got 60 vacancies, as the President says, across Home Affairs. The breakdown of these are 11 police officers and 3 customs officers. There's 28 vacancies in total across law enforcement. So that's across administrative and support roles as well. In the FCB, the Economic and Financial Crime Bureau, and the Financial Intelligence Unit, we have 19 vacancies currently there. So reflective, that's 35% of our target operating model of vacant posts at the moment within the FCB.
That's an incredible amount. Has it ever been that high?
No, it isn't. No. So this is the target operating model that we believe is the ultimate number that we need. However, we are still being able to progress investigations, and we are still being able to complete the mandate of the FCB. However, we are at a critical level, I would say, in that number of recruitments which we were able to attract.
And you say it isn't affecting some of the key services, but what is it affecting? What are you not doing as a result of not being able to employ those staff at the moment?
I probably need to go to the independent service areas for that, but what we're trying to do is prioritise the work that we need to do within law enforcement. I'll probably look to my colleagues in law enforcement. However, what we're doing is prioritising the scope of the work that we're taking on and what we're doing and the attention that we're giving. So there might be some supportive work that's not being undertaken because we're having to prioritise the offices that we do have amongst the most critical areas of work, and that will be across all the service areas.
To what extent is housing the root cause of this, would you say, or lack of?
I think the cost of living is having the effect, the cost of living locally and the availability of housing, which I know are interlinked. Mm-hmm. Certainly in the Economic and Financial Crime Bureau, we're needing to recruit skilled resources into that area. most of those will need to come from the UK or further afield. So it's those levels that we're finding it difficult to attract. We're getting interest in the vacancies that we do have. However, when they see the cost of living, it puts a number of people off, because obviously the cost of living is cheaper in the UK for housing. So
when you say the cost of living, you mean the cost of living rather than necessarily the cost of the goods in Waitrose. You rather mean the cost of actually buying a house or renting a house.
Yes, it's the housing market.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's quite all right. I'd just like to find out a bit more about, and I know that, like a lot of committees, you're having to prioritise work because of staff shortages. That's absolutely understood. But I'd still like to find out more about what is not happening that would be happening if you were fully staffed. I don't know whether you could turn to some of your colleagues in law enforcement, Deputy Prow, or have the answer yourself.
Well, I can give you an answer from a committee perspective, but I think I would encourage you to ask the questions. I think. As far as the economic and financial crime branch is concerned, what we really need to, by way of background, is to understand is that at the very beginning of this term, we decided that as a committee that an economic and financial crime bureau was an absolute necessity. And one of the things that we did is we looked at an operating model. We looked at the roles that were needed, and that was an actual increase on those that were originally provided under the bailiwick of law enforcement structure. So right from the beginning of this term, we have been in a mode of recruiting those skilled positions that we need, and that additional recruitment is placed against the background that you were quite rightly teasing out around the cost of living, around housing, but what we have achieved is we've set up an operating model. We've obviously appointed a director, and he has got key staff committed and working very hard on his mandate. And also what the committee has done this term is brought in the underpinning legislation, not only placing the FCB and the FRU on a statutory basis, but also putting tools in the box for those staff to be able to effectively operate, which was something that the committee had scoped and needed to do. And certainly in that regard, the committee and this bailiwick, because it's a bailiwick effort, is very well served. Where there is a challenge is what you're quite rightly pointing out in your questions, is recruiting into those posts that are vacant. But there are huge efforts going on both the Director of Operations and the Director of the Bureau to do this. One initiative that we have started to do is we have I think 3 investigators who are operating mainly out of the UK, so they don't need housing, and they come to the island when they're needed. And with the technology we now have and deployed successfully during COVID, that is, if you like, a workaround. So I can assure the Scrutiny Committee that we, despite the challenges, we have a very viable EFCB. On the question of the wider law enforcement, of course, we have entered into mutual assistance arrangements with the UK, and where operationally there have been pressures, we have brought in officers under that system. So. But that is in the same way as with agency nursing. That is an expensive way of doing things, and so we are absolutely committed to doing all we can to recruit. But the housing crisis and the cost of living is a factor which I think the whole Assembly, the whole of States of Guernsey has got to work on. So that's if you like the committee's answer, but
yeah, I don't doubt for a minute what you're doing as a committee to try and resolve this. It's a problem that a number of committees face, but it sounds as if this is having a significant impact on the work of Home Affairs. And what I'm trying to establish is what isn't being done as a result of not having those staff, which I still haven't had an answer to. Now, could I just ask, before we come on to that, and maybe draw in some of the law enforcement to give us some examples of that? Has the FCB ever been fully staffed? Have you ever reached the full complement of staff within the FCB?
The answer is no. As I tried to explain, when the bureau was devised, the numbers that were needed and the skills and the job descriptions were part of an operating model, and we always had to recruit up to that operating model. So we're talking about a new environment and a new way of delivering a response to financial crime. I think the Director of Operations has given you some indication around what's not being done. One of the things that tends to suffer in the environment that we're working to is the transformational type of activity that government really needs to be doing. Want to save money and to become more efficient. And what happens is the instinct and the way that law enforcement, for example, is to make sure that the front line is protected. I think where and the committee notices this, where you're researching new ways of doing things, where you're researching efficiencies, where you're perhaps wanting to do some of the more strategic developments, that what happens is that the resources get sucked onto the front line, and what we're trying to do in giving you answers is give an assurance that the island is a very safe and secure place to be, and that the priorities of those that head up services, whether it's fire and rescue, whether it's probation, whether it's the prison, whether it's the police, whether it's financial crime, the emphasis will always be to deliver the frontline services, and so in some ways your question is quite difficult to answer. But those from a committee point of view, the areas that I've outlined, that is where government, not only I would suggest Committee of Home Affairs, this is where government is really struggling. Because of the desire to keep our fundamental purpose intact, which is safety and security. That's where your resources get sucked into. In a police environment where we can't where we're challenged to be putting resources where we need to on the front line, then we will get mutual assistance in. So I hope I've given you some sort of answer to your question. The last thing I want to do is come to scrutiny and be accused of not giving you answers. But I would suggest that those on the front line may also want to give a view in answer to your question.
I mean, I don't know whether anybody from law enforcement wants to give us some examples, perhaps, of what is not being done as a result of your current understaffing.
I can help, hopefully. Phil Brebban, Deputy Chief Officer. As Mr Prow sort of says, and just to reiterate, we are an emergency service. That is our primary focus, providing a 24/7 response, and that will always be our focus. Recruitment is a challenge, and there are areas we've had to refocus or amend our responses. Areas of business that would have suffered through that would have been somewhere like a neighbourhood policing team. We're not at capacity in our neighbourhood policing team, and we'd like more officers in there, but the priority is the frontline 24 hours. We've had to adjust other areas. Our road policing team isn't to the capacity we'd like it to be to focus on road safety. Again, they have to focus on the emergency response. We've had to adjust our training regime and how we manage our training. Again, officers can't complete the full range of training they may wish to, but we do accommodate the essential training, the accreditation training. And those are the primarily those are the areas where we'd had to adjust our service to make sure we provide that 24/7 response.
Yeah, I think that's
Thank you.
Helpful. So it's not the case that you haven't got the financial resources, it's the case that you don't have the human resources.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Just coming back to the FCB, I mean, in terms of, I think you said there were 19 vacancies currently. Is that
16 in the FCB, I think 3 in the FIU.
Yes.
okay? Yeah, and that's out of a complement of, is it around 60, the full-time staffing of those?
55 posts in total.
55 in total. I mean, given the fact that there are such a number of vacancies in that area through no fault of your own, are you concerned at all at the impact that could have on the operation of those areas, particularly in light of the fact that there is a money val inspection coming up next year?
Yes, it is a concern. It is a challenge, but I have absolute confidence in the Bureau and the FIU that they will continue on their efforts to recruit. They will think outside the box as they already have done, and it's not as though recruiting to the operating model has been unsuccessful, and we have managed to recruit 6 posts. So it's not as though we're not rising to the challenge. And as I explained, we through the legislation that we've passed through the Assembly, we are implementing more legislative tools in the box. Some of which will allow the existing staff to be more efficient in what they do and more effective in what they do, and what we very much hope to do is to rise to that challenge and to work on recruiting to that operating model. The EFCB is a standalone response to financial crime and economic crime. That's what we believe Moneyval will be expecting us to do to manage the very successful and well regulated financial centre that we are, and I'm not trying to dismiss the challenges that recruitment presents. What I am saying to you is that I have absolute confidence in the staff we have. It's well run, well managed, well motivated to deliver, and I have every confidence and working with policy and resources, and indeed the whole assembly around the wider issues around recruitment. I am confident that in our preparedness for the Moneyval inspection, and that's one message through this hearing I really want to give. So we meet regularly with policy resources at a political level. Certainly all the partners that are involved in Moneyval meet regularly. They are well on top of what is expected in compliance with the FATF recommendations. And despite the challenges, we are in a very good position as regards to preparedness. But just to close on your point, I'm not minimising the issues that recruitment present to us. I'm trying to give you assurance that we are working through it. And I think, as the President pointed out, we're putting the legislation in place. That process is almost complete. It's not finished, and we've set up the bureau as a statutory organisation. We have good, excellent, quality staff in place, and a long-established, well-established financial intelligence unit, and that is working very well. So we are confident that we are prepared for the Moneyval evaluation, despite the recruitment challenges.
Thank you, Deputy Proud. Just before I turn to Mr. Dorry, I'd just like to ask one other question. We focused a lot on staff, but I'd just like to ask a question with regard to finances, if I may. And is being able to fund business as usual services a significant issue for your committee, do you feel?
I think, as probably every committee would say, that when you look at building a budget, one has to look into the constraints. One of the main worries and challenges for the committee we've already established. We can live within our budget at the moment, because we are not paying for the staff that we can't recruit. So our financial situation is through underspends is manageable, but there are initiatives, particularly around the justice piece, where there's always more that we feel we could do. We are a committee that very much works and understands the government work plan concepts, and we build to that. I think one of my concerns around the government work plan process actually is touched upon by your question, because I don't think the government work plan really recognises business as usual type initiatives, such as, for example, in a home affairs environment, servicing your legislation. Legislation cannot stand still. We've got our PACE provisions and regulation investigatory powers legislation, which requires updating, and that requires resource. And really, those sorts of matters and actually many other really should be dealt with as business as usual. And I'm not sure that the government work plan recognises that. And of course, budget building now is very difficult and challenging, because the emphasis, quite rightly, is around where you can make savings, and the committee is very much aware of that. But I think by prioritising and by sticking to our safe and secure mandate, the budget allocation that we have does allow us to maintain that. I think it's in areas of transformation, in areas of where you need funding to save money and to transform, and perhaps some of the less frontline aspects of business as usual is where the Committee of Home Affairs tends to sees the narrowness of its budget.
Thank you. I'd just like to jump in on one of the things picking up from before about housing. I mean, there's a long lead time on building houses in any case, and there are a lot of pressures from other quarters, including the existing demand and the potential for increased immigration, obviously, as a result of the population review. So, you know, it's perhaps reasonable to assume that the pressure on housing isn't something that's going to go away anytime soon, even in the sort of, medium future. If that's the case, what other measures are you considering to resolve these staff shortages? Are there any? You've told me about bringing in short-term contracts from the UK and the occasional person working in the UK. The first one, obviously, as you've said, is an expensive measure, and the second one isn't practical for when you need sort of people on the ground in Guernsey. So are there any other measures, or is this just going to be a constant challenge?
Well, absolutely, it is a constant challenge. I think the issue is that in the delivery end of government, you need quality professional people who tend to look at the package in the round, and yes, there are temporary measures that we can and we will employ, and they will help, but they will not solve the ultimate issue, which is one with the global demand on skilled workers. It's finding them and recruiting them in the first place, and then, as the Director of Operations said, is then persuading them that the package is attractive.
Yeah, but the Director of Operations has said that you do get applicants, but when they see the cost of housing, then they lose interest. So I think, housing is obviously not the only reason. There are other factors, but we clearly know, I think, that it's a significant reason, and it also looks likely that it's not an easy one to fix, because there's going to be a constant demand, as we know. House prices over here testify to it. It's a vicious circle. Are there any other solutions at all? I mean, does that come down to paying more so that the houses that they could rent or buy seem more affordable? What other solutions are there to this other than continuing with a shortage of staff and the low-level stuff that would normally get done for some considerable time?
Yeah, well, the Director of Operations is absolutely right. We do get applicants, and sometimes those applicants are not persuaded by the package you give them. But even then, I think if you're talking about economic and financial crime, those very specialist appointments are very difficult. But the package is is very, very important. I think that the only real way forward with this is to pursue this with policy and resources, and that's the overall remuneration package is in the gift of policy resources, not in the committee. And I think working through these issues across government is the only way to solve them. And to some degree, that was the purpose of the population management immigration policy review, which was to highlight to the Assembly what those issues were and come up with a set of propositions that will tend to help the situation. But it is extremely difficult, and it needs to be tackled across government.
Okay, and would it help you if you had additional flexibility in making those decisions on employment yourselves?
It certainly would on some of those challenges, but I understand our system of government. I understand what the responsibilities of policy resources are. I understand the restraints that the government and the challenges the government work plan puts in place. But these are structures that the Committee of Home Affairs has to work with, and I think. Okay,
thank you, Deputy Prout. I'll just pass over now to Mr. Doré, who's got some questions.
Good morning. In early 2023, the states will be asked to debate the issue of tax reform and plugging the revenue black hole. P&R have given notice that public services may need to be cut due to financial constraints. And in the report, your committee said that any cost-cutting exercise would see budgets reduced. Any cost-cutting exercise that would see budgets reduced by 5% as unachievable and potentially dangerous to the community. In the report, it goes on to say opportunities previously identified include tagging as an alternative to custodial services, modernisation of fixed penalty notices, and adoption of a national single online home web-based platform for digital contact and crime reporting, and outsourcing of court group prison officers. As you anticipate in 2022 a 2.7 underspend in your budget, and presumably we're not in a dangerous situation currently, what specific savings and what effects will they have if you had to make a further 2.3% cut in your budget?
Yes, so that is the political question of the day. I think the Committee of Home Affairs and the services that it delivers around the safe and secure mandate are absolutely fundamental to producing the right environment for in industry to survive. One of the reasons that we've got a successful finance industry is built on the fact that it operates out of a safe and secure environment, and that it certainly takes combating money laundering, the finance of terrorism, very, very seriously. But the challenges to not only the government in Guernsey, to all governments, they are expensive to run. We've just, in the scrutiny hearing, discussed issues around recruitment. We've discussed the committee and the services response is primarily to keep the island safe and secure, but to meet the challenges, whether they be from money val, whether they be from fire and rescue, how we rehabilitate people who have fallen foul of the law, We need to progress this. We can't. In a government, you just cannot stand still. And I think, although you've mentioned underspends, the underspends are actually a worry and concern, because the committee feels that we do need those people that we can't recruit to maintain the right financial environment for the economy and for the island.
But we're not in a dangerous situation, are we? Currently, I know we've got an underspend, and we've got vacancies. No, we're not in a dangerous situation, but the ability for a jurisdiction like ourselves to keep safe and secure must be properly funded, and it would be totally irresponsible for the Committee of Home Affairs in building budgets, in putting forward capital projects, to go anywhere near being in a dangerous position. And I don't think that is we're a responsible, mature democracy. That there shouldn't be a race for the bottom. Sort of expecting government and the Committee of Home Affairs to move to a dangerous situation would be completely irresponsible. What I'm trying to explain is that the fact that there are underspends is not a positive thing, because we need to recruit people. We need to make sure that we do have the basics of law enforcement. You've heard about pressures on neighbourhood policing, for example. Why are there pressures on neighbourhood policing? Is because law enforcement are completely responsible, and they're placing prioritising their resources, and their foremost thinking is about keeping the population safe and secure. And the same applies across all of the services. I think one in the debate about the cost of public services, the danger for those committees delivering fundamental services, that to make any real inroads into reducing your budget, you have to make drastic decisions. For example, 5% of our budget represents the combined budget of probation and the domestic abuse strategy. 10% is nearly the entire fire and rescue service budget. 15% represents the funding allocated to the prison service. So where you're moving to an environment of looking at the Home Affairs budget and saying, well, you're not in a dangerous position. So, fundamentally, we can claw back that money. Is just not a responsible way, in my view, of looking at that. Do you have any comments on the previous opportunities that I read out, which are in the report, which were identified as potentially savings, because there were savings identified previously, and you've got no other savings you can add to those that you have identified? The identified savings comes out of a process which the Committee of Home Affairs continually does, is asking the services to look and see where, if budgets were reduced, where savings can be made. And I will give the Scrutiny Committee the assurance that is an ongoing process, and a lot of those initiatives will continue to be looked at. But
I don't want to raise expectations that if you're balancing keeping the island safe and secure against making savings, there are some very difficult choices to make. But I'm not suggesting that you dismiss them out of hand. So that the list that was prepared and submitted to Policy and Resources is a genuine looking at opportunities where possibly we can make savings, but the expectation that they will be dramatic savings, I don't want to give that expectation at this hearing.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Pratt. We'll just take a 5-minute break now, and if we could reconvene, please, at 10 minutes past 11. Thank you.
Thank you.
If we could reconvene.
Just waiting for...
Okay, thank you for that. Deputy Prow, in your update to the States Assembly in June of this year, you said, as a committee, we continue to be supportive of the principles of the GWP, but the need for government to provide strategic direction, prioritise and collaborate is even more acute. There is therefore an even greater requirement for those who lead the GWP to better engage with those at the delivery end of government. This could be read as a criticism of the engagement between PNR and committees in general. So could you give some specifics on what exactly you meant by that?
Yes, I can, and I stand by that. I think from a committee perspective, the whole process, particularly at the political end of it, gets squashed. I think what I was trying to promote was that engagement with the committees happens earlier and perhaps in a more robust way. I think I am supportive of the government work.
Can you give me an example?
I think in the process of finalising the actual content of the policy letter, of perhaps comparing submissions by other committees and having opportunities to have a better discussion and better engagement from a committee of Home Affairs could have been done better.
Right. Okay. So have you had discussions with PNR to see if that can be improved in future?
Yeah, one of the I was a member of the States in the 2016 term. I think one of the improvements that has been made is the President to President's forum, and coincidental to your question, at the last President to President meetings, I asked for the government work plan to be placed as an agenda item, and there was good, healthy discussion from the presidents around the question, one of engagement, but about the next iteration of the government work plan and how presidents, committees can influence. And again, I stress the importance of early engagement. Mm-hmm. The government work plan is a discipline, and it needs buy-in from the committees. Otherwise, it fails in its purpose. It's much more focused, I think, than the old policy and resources plan. But I think it does need work, and certainly around the question of what actually is prioritised and ends up in it would benefit from perhaps some difficult conversations and a more robust process.
Okay, thank you. And is your committee at all concerned about the future of the GWP, especially in the light of the resignation of Deputy Salisbury, who, of course, was the lead on that?
I think, well, of course, every committee is rightly concerned about the government work plan. It underpins what we can't deliver, and perhaps more importantly, what we can't. So there is concern. I think the government work plan actually is perhaps in a transitional period anyway. So I think the work done by Deputy Salisbury will necessarily develop, and the committee will work with the makeup of the present PNR to squeeze the best out of we can for the bailiwick Guernsey.
And thank you. At a recent hearing that this committee had with Policy and Resources on the government work plan, they made clear that there was going to have to be some rationalisation of the capital projects in the government work plan. Has your committee been asked what capital projects it could forego?
That part of the process is really in the early stages of engagement. So no, not specifically, and that really endorses the point I've just made. I think about where you are, where the government work plan is starting to impinge on what committees can't deliver or what facilities they need in forms of capital projects. That's where a good, robust system of dialogue is absolutely fundamental.
And you think the presidents-to-presidents meetings fill that gap?
To some extent, but not completely. I think that the engagement with committee by P&R, both at officer level and at a political level, needs to be strengthened. That's my fundamental.
Okay, thank you. That's a very straight answer. What, if any, interaction have you had with P&R regarding Priority 4, which we don't always hear a great deal about in the GWP, the reshaping of government review?
Well, as an individual deputy, that's a subject I am quite interested in, and again, I go back to my earlier point around. I think that committees, those committees that deliver, have a great interest in this, and I think there's definitely more dialogue. I mean, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think one of the issues with our present system is government is a disconnect between P&R, who provide, and we've spoken about it today, a lot of the central services, and HR, IT, and the committees that are actually delivering services on the ground needs to be better joined up, and I think that particular work stream really should be looking at those challenges.
So rather than possibly the political reorganisation, more the systems behind it that can make it work better?
Well, yes, but both. I think it's and this to some degree happened last term. It's okay reforming government, but you've got to match those reforms with the political machinery that's together. I think to disconnect the two is unwise, and I think that's perhaps where I'm looking forward to, both as a deputy and as a committee, to exchanging ideas in those particular areas. Okay.
And do you feel that some of the state's processes unnecessarily hamper your ability to deliver projects then?
I think inevitably all governments have a bureaucratic processes which I think the committee would absolutely agree need to be looked at and streamlined. Okay. I mean, what the trouble is with when you centralise government, that some of the decision makers and processes don't have ownership of the problems, and there are issues, I think, with the time it takes to sign things off and get things done. We spent a lot of time talking about the issues with recruitment, but there's an HR process, and I think streamlining overdue some scrutiny and review.
Okay, thank you. Now, I know you've touched on money val, which is obviously one of the most important things in front of you at the moment, a little bit, but I think Mr. Dorey has a few further questions for you on that.
Thank you. Now we have the full independence of the Economic Crime Bureau. Do you expect an increase in prosecutions locally as a result of this change?
Absolutely, I do. The complexity of such investigations and the ability to turn the intelligence that the FIU possesses, or intelligence that comes from money laundering reporting officers, needs to be properly and professionally investigated. We have that capability, and certainly the whole raison d'être for the Bureau is not only to put more investigations before the law officers, but where the proceeds of crime are identified, to be moving money that we have restrained, or money on no consent, moving that to full confiscation, and that is the whole purpose of the operating models and the strategies, both of the FIU and of the EFCB. These processes take time. These investigations are complex, but I have, and I know the committee has, every confidence in the director and his staff to make progress. So that's both on doing those investigations, putting them before the laws of the Crown, and identifying the proceeds of crime, and where possible to move them into full confiscation. And that is why this committee has been very proactive in producing policy letters, and we have the support of the Assembly, and we've signed off as an Assembly many pieces of legislation which gives those now independent statutory organisations the tools in the box to assist them in that endeavour.
Thank you. I know you've also spoken about the money val inspection before, but in the case of other jurisdictions, they've engaged in a mock evaluation ahead of the money val inspection. Is that what you intend to do in Guernsey?
I did touch on this. Both at an officer level, the statutory organisations that come under Home Affairs, the law officers of the Crown, the GFSC, Registry, the Revenue Service, there is constant engagement at an officer level, and a political oversight. A group that's alternately chaired by the Chief Minister or the President of P&R and myself, where that process is effectively being conducted, not necessarily by a mock evaluation, which takes a lot of time and effort, but by real scrutiny around matching what the FATF recommendations require and what our responses to. We have the states Guernsey are well served with the expertise in that area. That we have two resources that we supply to the IMF that are doing evaluations in other jurisdictions. So I would say the preparedness is first class, and that a total mock evaluation is not the best use of resources, and it's well covered by the systems that we've set in place.
So is there anything that concerns you regarding the evaluation coming up? Any areas that you're concerned about?
It would be irresponsible not to be on top of this. I think it's an evaluation. The Moneyval evaluators will ask for submissions and will turn up, and those evaluations get harder and harder. That's the way that we work. And we are at the end of a cycle of evaluations. We will have a very thorough scrutiny of all the activities that I've outlined. And in some areas we will be evaluated higher than others. That's the nature of evaluation. Very few jurisdictions particularly get a consistent high score across all the evaluation criteria. What I really want to say is that from a government perspective, with regard to the structures we've put in, the legislation that we've put in, and the assurances that we're getting from the independent statutory organisations, be they the law officers or those that come under Home Affairs, everybody is absolutely committed and completely understands what is required, and anywhere where there is a deficiency that has been highlighted, action is being taken to take action to address this. The majority of those actions, particularly from a Home Affairs perspective, have already been put in place, but we're not being complacent. You mentioned a mock evaluation. I am convinced that the processes that we have, if there are any other issues, they will be teased out, and we will address them. I think that's probably the best answer I can give.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Fairclough.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to focus on population management for a moment, if I may, and ask the question, do you believe that the move to potentially issuing more long-term permits will aid public services retention of key staff, and if so, over what sort of timescale?
Yeah, sorry. So your question is really around. I think you're talking about public service. Are you?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think interestingly, population management regime has and its flexibility has always been an enabler for government services. Population management has not been an inhibitor, whether you're talking about staff professionals that come under HSC or say law enforcement or financial crime. That is not the inhibitor. The ability to move to establish residence for those people who are providing skills specialist roles within government service have always been facilitated through the population management. I think we've you've teased out very well the recruitment issues and the housing issues. That to me is more of the concern. It's more about the overall package that government can provide to these people. There is not an inhibitor in relation to the population management regime, and with the administrator of the population management regime is present. I'm not sure if you'd like to ask him a.
Okay, well, just widening that question out then. Do you personally, or do you as a committee, believe the changes following the recommendations in your recent policy letter will actually lead to a significant increase in the population locally? To
me, that's horse and cart, chicken and egg. I think what the population management review has done is precisely what was needed. You see that that the policy and strategy around population immigration is led by the Assembly as a whole. The Committee for Home Affairs and the statutory posts, whether they be immigration or population management, implement that strategy. And I think I found that the debate and the 16 or 17 propositions are very helpful in outlining what that policy is. But the challenges are where there are skill shortages or labour shortages, all of which are important to sustain the economy. The ability to facilitate those through both immigration and population management have been established and improved, I think, through that debate and the propositions. Of course, whether businesses, or government can recruit the people that we need, the inhibitor will not be population management in immigration. It will be some of the other factors that the review teased out around housing, and there's a proposition that covers that. It's around upskilling the local population. It's about attracting people who are resident and where the population management and immigration don't impinge upon them, attracting them back into the workplace. I think that what the review has done is to clarify what those issues are, and to some extent that the Assembly has agreed propositions that, working across government, we can address them. I don't know if that helps in answering your question.
Okay, so do you think there are other ways we could increase the working population, then, other than simply by increasing the population?
Yes, absolutely, and I think this is again the propositions include working with the Committee for Education, Sport and Culture, economic development, absolutely key players in this, and this is, I think, one thing that in this term. We do work very well across committee. We have those conversations, and I think for me the population and immigration review was overdue. It's a process that started in the last term. It never saw the light of day until I resigned from Home Affairs in the last term. There was a lot of dialogue, lot of discussion. No policy letter arrived last term. By working across committee, and I was very privileged to chair that, we have halfway through the term produced a policy letter and successfully got a consensus on those propositions through the Assembly. I think that's a very, very positive achievement. And one other thing process that we've done is we are joining together two separate pieces of legislation, which is the population management regime and the immigration regime, to make it hopefully in the longer term cost effective to run, but certainly from the customer's perspective, i.e. businesses and those people seeking the permissions that they need, to be a much more seamless process, despite the fact, and rightly, those processes are covered by two separate pieces of legislation. So, yes, I think that the population and immigration management review and the completion through the states is a good thing. But like everything else, it takes time. We're going through a process now of mapping out the delivery around those recommendations, and that will of course include discussions with our partners, economic development, education, environment, infrastructure, who've got key roles in all this, and I'm looking forward to the next stage of developing this.
You're confident you have the resources within the committee to progress that work, given some of the concerns that we've heard about recruitment and not sufficient staff? Well,
yeah, I mean, there's, I think, those wider concerns that we've aired. But I think one of the good things about the process was that it was cross-committee, so we were able to use P&R resources, economic development resources, and resources from E&I and other committees to work as a team. And I think that is the way in the financial situation we find ourselves, is the only way that we can progress some of these initiatives. And I think it's important that we've gone through the process and that we now have instructions from the States Assembly how to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
We have this.
Yep, that's all on population. Thank
Mr.
you.
Story.
On the justice framework, in your July update statement, you said that the action plan will need to be resourced to allow the committee to deliver, and you express your concerns that the current GWP will not deliver adequate funding. What are the implications of insufficient funding being available for the justice framework?
A good question. I think the implications are delay. I think again the justice mandate was added to the mandate of Home Affairs in 2016, and we had the scoping review that was published and debated under a green paper, surveyed and amended, and it's in this term of government that we've come to grips with it, and I was very pleased that the Assembly approved our justice framework, but now to deliver under it and to produce an action plan, we have to slot that in with the government work plan. And I think the plan identifies only 7 priorities and three actions. So we have a review of legal aid. We've got the non-punitive approaches to small quantities of legal drugs, the delivery of domestic abuse and sexual violence strategy, which I'm very pleased that we've made good progress on. But we've got other issues like the scoping of safeguarding requirements, and we need to do some more work on secondary ordinance to sexual offences, implementation of the parole rule, modernising of the appeal court, but I have mentioned this as previously in this hearing, the scoping of PACE and regulation investigating powers legislation, and reviewing of sentencing policy. And whilst the committee recognise the resourcing challenges of preparing an ambitious plan, we feel strongly that the action plan should provide a roadmap for justice, which recognises the committee's operational and strategic mandate of keeping the island safe and secure. And I think I mentioned in answer to your President's questions, I think that we have identified cross-committee justice actions, and I think that the challenges are around getting more recognition into the justice framework, and so that the action plan can be delivered perhaps sooner than the current government work plan outlines. But that is the challenge for the committee, and that is a challenge that we need to discuss with policy and resources. So the bottom line answer is yes, an action plan. The framework is agreed. The action plan can be published, and we're working through that now. Where I think we are anxious is that the timelines are faster than those that currently appear in the government work plan.
Okay, thank you. Is it possible to separate justice and social policy? With research undertaken with Jersey Police recently showing that almost 50% of their time is spent on activities that could be described as safeguarding activities and supporting vulnerable adults. Do we need to reevaluate the way we look at the role of law enforcement locally?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the law enforcement annual report, and you tease out from the information there that yes, a lot of law enforcement time is spent in the areas that you've just outlined. This is an area across government to look at, because if the police aren't going to respond 24/7 to these issues, who is? Yeah. And that is the challenge. And I think there's a lot of things. Teasing out what the issues are is one thing. Finding the solutions where resources are tight, finances are tight, and appetite to find the funding is low, is a challenge. But it is a good question, and it's certainly something that the committee is alive to. What the ultimate answers to the questions aren't yet worked through. I don't know whether you're talking about the UK or Jersey or Guernsey.
So do you think this will be reflected in the type of skills that you'd be looking to recruit, or the training that you're going to be giving to your law enforcement?
I think the question of training, the question of the priorities of law enforcement would probably be, that's an operational consideration, and probably be better answered by the operational officers that are with us today. If you're happy to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Training skills is really important, obviously an issue, and we've just gone through a programme of safe lives, domestic abuse training across all operational staff to bring them back up to the speed where it's a College of Policing UK initiative, which we've embedded across the force, because our focus is on safeguarding, emergency response, safeguarding and vulnerable people, as Mr Prowse says, form a huge amount of our police work and a huge demand on our services at the moment.
So you are looking to it in training, but what about in recruiting skills? Is that equally important?
It is. It's difficult. We look to recruit specialists in crime services area where they can come into public protection units, and we have been successful in a very small number of cases in identifying skilled officers who bring those safeguarding skills with them. It is an area we do focus on, and even in our new recruits, we put them into a programme of training that addresses safeguarding and vulnerable people issues.
Thank you.
If you could stay with us for a moment, I'd just like to follow up on that. I mean, it's certainly good to hear that, and clearly domestic abuse is a crime, and therefore officers being trained for that is an excellent thing. However, do you get called to deal with issues which perhaps which aren't crimes, but come under more perhaps the mental health category? And in those cases, is your role simply transferring these people to the right services within the island?
Yes, we get a huge, significantly increasing demand to support people in the community in times of need. And like Mr. Proud said, because we're a 24-hour service, particularly out of hours for other agencies, we will get a number of calls and we do respond. Sorry, and what was the second part of that?
Well, it's more about, I just wondered how much of your time that takes up. I think I saw a news report this week, and I can't remember the exact details, but where a police force in the UK was looking at very much not getting involved in these kind of issues where no crime is involved, and because they felt that it impinged too much on their time and it should be dealt with by other agencies. But presumably in the Guernsey context, perhaps it's different for us. And I just wondered how that works for you with dealing with these things. Do you find your officers are sitting with people until such time as the service opens? How does it work?
Our officers do find themselves in that positions, but we recognise the demand on other social services and the limited resource they have. And like them, we're never going to walk away from a person in need. We will provide a service, even if it's not appropriate that we provide that service. We will do our utmost to do it.
And I mean, this is probably a difficult question to answer, but what sort of percentage of your time do those sort of bailiwick law enforcement, do those sort of things occupy, do you think?
I think the last review identified 30% of our service was directed towards vulnerable people, and it's increased.
Where there's no crime link?
Yes,
okay.
Very much so.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, we're sort of coming towards the end, but I've just got, as I'm sure Deputy Proud might expect, a question on the Sexual Assault Referral Centre. Home Affairs resources have been focused on progressing the work identified through the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Strategy and on establishing the SARC. You recently advertised for a manager for the SARC. Did you have a good response, knowing how difficult it is to recruit people generally?
Yes, thank you for that question. We had an excellent response, and we are very, very pleased to be able to advise you that an appointment is in the process of being made in this area, and it gives me an opportunity to thank those people that all quality people that put themselves forward for this post. Very, very, very encouraging. And
is this an on-island recruitment?
Yes.
Okay.
And we have identified premises, and again we're in the process of completing that, and the manager will be pleased to know there's plenty for her to get involved with.
Okay, and do you have an approximate date when you think the service will actually be up and running and open?
I think at this stage we need to be thinking about the forensic medical examination aspects of it. Again, a lot of work has been done. We are at if you like, the beginning of the end of the first process. So I would not like to be drawn into an actual date, but we've the commitment we've made and the funding and resources we've got through the government work plan process agreed by this assembly the pilot scheme will commence as early in 2023 as we possibly can make it.
Okay, thank you. Computer Emergency Response Team. In your July 22 statement, you said Home Affairs is working to establish a computer emergency response team, which in the event of significant cyber attack will provide the conduit between government and the UK's National Cyber Security Centre. Has this team now been established?
The original plan was to do this in collaboration with Jersey, but that's not been possible. But I'm very happy to report that what we have decided to do is to go out for expressions of interest and a procurement programme, inviting tenders to commission those services out, and that the expressions of interest have gone out. We're very pleased that we've got a good number of quality expressions of interest, and actually at the last committee meeting we had have given the go ahead to move from expressions of interest to a tendering and commissioning process. So I'm very happy to report that the establishment of a cert is moved to a positive stage.
Thank you. Could you elaborate a little bit more on why it wasn't possible to work with Jersey? The caveat I would say to that is that we are still in dialogue with Jersey. It's the Director of Operations can give you more specifics, but as I understand it, the direction that Jersey wanted to go was not compatible with how we wanted to proceed, and cooperation with Jersey is fine, but where only where identical or near identical solutions can be found. But we've had a recent informal discussions along with economic development around working with Jersey, and both at officer level and the political level, that dialogue is continuing, and it may well be that further down the road progress can be made. Your question was specifically about the cert. Yeah.
And we need, in a Guernsey scenario, we need to set up a cert sooner rather than later, and that's the course that we've taken. I don't know whether the Director of Operations would like to add anything to what I've said.
Did you want to add anything, Mr. Lorraine?
No. The President's absolutely right. We remain to be engaged with Jersey, and we have open discussion. We have an open discussion at the start before we went out to expressions of interest on what our requirements were. And that open discussion identified some perhaps areas that Jersey wouldn't be able to deliver on our behalf. So what we want is an all-encompassing service aimed on the initial objectives that we set for the cert. So our current approach is to carry on with the expressions of interest, which Jersey were not wanting to enter formally. However, that discussion does continue, where there's elements that we can still work together. Jersey have set theirs up and they've got their resources in place. If they adopted and could extend to all of our requirements, they would need to recruit extra staff. They wouldn't be able to deliver it from what they've got. So we went through that model of working, and we considered it better that with agreement from our Jersey colleagues that we carry on this avenue. But that door is still open, and we're still open for discussions. Whilst we're going out to the tendering process, discussions do continue with our Jersey colleagues.
Okay, thank you. Now, just to wrap up with two more questions, and I'll preface them by saying that the Scrutiny Management Committee has recently as a new initiative, gone out to the Duzanes ahead of these hearings to ask if they have any issues pertinent to the committee. And we've had a couple of questions in. I think they both pertain to law enforcement. I don't know if there's something Mr. Brevin might want to help with, but I'll send them out to you first. So these are just a couple of questions that have come in that direction. The first one is, do you feel that traffic enforcement is adequately resourced? And is this something that perhaps the Duzanes could assist with in any way at all?
Yeah, I think it would be useful to get an operational response to that. All I would say from a committee perspective is that we've had several very productive meetings with E&I on the whole question of road safety and traffic issues, and that we are together with that committee looking at how we might jointly develop our responses at a political level, whether it's increasing the use of fixed penalties, freeing up law enforcement time to investigate the higher end of road traffic issues. So that it's very much at an early stage. It is something that we're doing as business as usual, because we are not able to assert that into the government work plan. But politically, working with that committee, there's some good initiatives, particularly around and the committee itself is actively progressing its response to drink driving and drug driving. So I think that's from a political point of view.
I don't think the Duzanes were suggesting that they would be involved in the enforcement role in case the question came across slightly that way. But I think there is a concern, particularly in the more heavily populated parishes, on issues around traffic enforcement, and I think that the Duzanes are trying to be proactive here and wondering to what way they could assist with that. The other question is the one which we've touched on slightly already, which surrounds neighbourhood or community policing, and there certainly seems to be a keenness for that to increase. But we've already heard today that that's one of the things that falls off the radar when posts can't be filled. So I just wondered if you have any future plans to sort of build that up again when it's possible.
Well, I think that dialogue with the Duzanes around the practical issues that happen in the parish, both at a political level and an operational level, is to be encouraged. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you would like the
yes. Mr. Brevin, did you want to add anything to that before we wrap up?
Thank you. As we all know, neighbourhood policing is one of our top priorities, as is road policing, road safety. I can say in the last week we have adjusted our staffing to appoint a school liaison officer, which has come out of the neighbourhood policing team, unfortunately, but it is a priority to get into the schools, into the youngsters. So there is a balance to be had. We are proactively recruiting, and we will extend and develop the neighbourhood policing team as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I think we've come to 12 o'clock, so time to wrap up. Thank you to everybody for attending and for increasing the public awareness and understanding of the work done by the Committee for Home Affairs. Though we do undertake regular hearings, as you know, and it will be on the Scrutiny website when we have the date of our next hearing, which will be in the new year. But in the meantime, thank you very much, everybody, and the meeting's now closed.